Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma,
And I'm MC.
and we are your hosts of the G Forces podcast. So, this week we have the Barcelona Grand Prix coming up. It is the home race of Carlos Sainz and our favorite, Fernando Alonso. We have a lot of favorites when I think about it, but it's okay. It's also
We
kind of
do.
our home race because our family hails from Spain. Not Barcelona though, because yeah, we're not from Barcelona. We're Madrid.
We're more
But basically
Madrid.
the same not really the same thing at all. People from Barcelona would be very mad about me saying that. But it's whatever. So we've got a good episode coming up for you guys. We are going to discuss MC is gonna go over a team principal. Who is that, Mary Catherine?
Yeah, we're gonna go over James Vowles this week. I feel like Williams has been the hot topic the last like 2 weeks in terms of obviously the Carlos Sainz rumors that are going around. Well, honestly, not rumors. We've heard it directly from James's mouth that he wants Carlos. Um, and we're like a little closer to halfway through the season, so I know we've slowly been going over the team principles, so I figured why not throw another one at you guys. But what about you? What are you going to talk about this weekend?
I am going to talk about the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. There's a lot of history behind the Spanish Grand Prix. It's happened at a few different venues. It's happened at, I think it started off in like Madrid, then it went to Barcelona, and then it went to Bilbao, and then San Sebastian, and then Valencia, and now back in Barcelona. And then
With
there's the potential it's going to be in
rumors,
Madrid in a couple
Madrid.
of years. So it's kind of been all over the country, which is kind of interesting. I was originally going to talk about the San Sebastian one, but that happened pre like actual F1 that happened in like the 1930s. So I think most of the time since the 50s, it's been in like Valencia, Madrid, and Barcelona. 1991 is actually the first race at the Catalunya track, the Circuit de Catalunya. At least I believe. So yeah, I'm gonna be talking about that one. It's got some of the big names that we've talked about a million times before, but still always a cool year to talk about because of those people, honestly. And then we'll close it out like we normally do. If there's any news that we've thought of in the time that we've been recording, then we will bring it up at the very end.
Yeah,
All right, are we ready to get into it?
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's do it. All right, so to start us off, Mary Catherine is going to go over James Vowles and his whole history. Also, on a completely different note, because I didn't just remember, I remembered earlier today, but because we're recording today, to any of the fathers who are listening, Happy Father's Day in the U.S. And James Vowles is recently a father, so go for
I
it, Mary
think
Catherine.
it's beyond. I think Father's Day is like I've seen a lot of international people posting, so I don't know if it's just like US or
I
anyways.
know that Father's Day and Mother's Day happen everywhere else, but they happen on like different days, I'm pretty sure. Because I'm pretty sure when Lewis posted like Happy Mother's Day for his mom, it was not our Mother's Day.
Yeah. But happy
Anyways,
Father's Day for those that are and are listening. So yeah, like the other team principals we've gone over in the past, this is really just going to be a pretty high level view on his career and what he's been through and done. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of who he is as a person. But James Vowles was born in Felbridge, West Sussex on June 20th, 1979. So his birthday is coming up, fast approaching. I
wait,
believe
what day
his
did you say
version
it was?
June 20th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I believe his version of high school was attending the International School of Geneva. So, yeah,
Whenever we
I
hear that they went to schools like that, I am reminded that they are rich because that is absurd.
yeah, I tried to like look into it, but there's not like a lot of like I mean, I didn't want to get stuck on the International School of Geneva, but Yeah, so in 2000, he got a computer science degree from the University of East Anglia, and apparently after obtaining this degree, he attempted to get into the F1 world, but faced, like, a lot of rejection. From what I could tell, he was a lot more mathematics-based, and he was kinda told by the F1 world, like, "You should really look into getting into engineering." So in 2001, he went to Cranfield University and obtained a master's degree in motorsport engineering and management. So
The fact that
like I
it's a
always
degree to like major in motorsport engineering is insane.
I mean, when you think about like the amount of engineers in F1 right now, but then also every other motorsport,
Yeah.
Le Mans just ended this morning.
Yeah.
Think of all those engineers. And then the other thing is too is there is such a force of engineers at
Every
the
race.
bases. Well,
Yeah.
and at back at like the factory and whatnot.
Well, I guess it makes sense because there's degrees in aerospace engineering which need less people to manage because of how many people are going to
Well,
space.
plus motorsport engineering, I'm curious how much of it, if you can go into like car design and stuff like that too, with like, you know,
I would imagine.
um So while completing this, he did a project designing a racing car, and his project, so I don't know if he did it individually or with a team of people, but his project won the Pro Drive Award of Excellence for designing the car. And this got the attention of the F1 world. Apparently, according to the internet, he literally like received job offers that day. Um, his first role in F1 was with the British American Racing Team in 2001. So as you can tell, he pretty quickly post Masters was already like launching into the F1 world. He stayed with them, and then in 2009, James was the like this is kind of where like people will know him from. In 2009, James was the chief strategist for Braun GP. The team that year won drivers and constructors championship, and we haven't done an episode on Braun, but that was their only year they were racing.
It's a
And
really
they
cool story, their team. If you have a chance to watch it on Disney Plus, I definitely would.
Yeah, so pretty cool that he was a part of that. At the end of that season, Braun was bought and became what is now known as Mercedes. James stayed on.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
of the team from Braun ended up staying on for Mercedes. So like when you look at the team in 2017 and you look at the photos back in 2009 for Braun, it's a lot of the same people. They just stayed on forever.
yeah, he stayed in his chief strategist role, so that's what he was at Braun GP, he was a chief strategist, and then when he came to Mercedes, or when it became Mercedes, he stayed in the chief strategist role, and basically he was seen as the successor of Toto Wolff. Like, people put Toto Wolff and James Vowles in, like, hand in hand during these days. And for those that do not know, Toto Wolff is the team principal of Mercedes.
And
Um,
CEO.
uh, yeah, and I think, like, the belief was that James, was gonna fill Toto's shoes eventually when, Toto steps down, but
Yeah.
in 2019, Voles was promoted from chief strategist to motorsport strategy director. And in this role, he oversaw the simulation or sim department, along with race strategy and performance analysis. So I'm curious to see, in terms of like growth within a Formula One team, what would have been the like next thing? Would that have been team principal? Like, is that the only next step up
I
in,
almost think that
you
it
know,
was the only next step for him. Like he'd been
yeah.
in that sort of position for so long that the only next step really would have been team principal or team owner of some sort.
Yeah. So in 2023, it was announced that he would be taking over as team principal for Williams. And apparently there's a quote with him stating that like while he loved Mercedes, it was just like too easy. Like he wanted a challenge. And he sure as hell is getting one. um
Yes, definitely.
The other cool thing that I didn't know is that James is only the 3rd team principal in Williams history. Williams just has a long retainer, I guess, but yeah.
Who have been there? I'm guessing Frank Williams was the team principal for a while.
Mhm.
Claire was technically co-team principal. Like she never was given the title team principal, but she was like, she stepped in while her dad was sick. And then they had that one guy who was the rally car person.
Yeah.
And then I guess they had James after that.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. Um,
Sorry, guys, give us a quick second.
yeah, hold on. I'll have to look it up
Yeah,
offline,
we'll tell y'all at the
but
end of this episode.
yeah. So, yeah, that is James in a nutshell. Like most of the other team principals, there's not like this deep, like in touch biography on their lives. I think you get that more with the drivers and that level of celebrity. Um, but like I say at the end of every team principal, it just kind of like lets our listeners and us kind of know like, hey, if you want to get into this world, this is one, the amount of education that a lot of these guys are getting, and two, this is,
The kind of
the
education that they're
specific,
getting.
yeah, and the specific engineering.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's him. I know.
I do always
I
find it interesting the way that people talk about how he was his first year at Williams and how he was super kind and patient. And then the way that he's kind of been with Logan this season of like being a bit more blunt and straightforward. And people are like, what happened to the kind James Vowles? And it's like he was not like this kind person. He was never a bad person. He's not a bad person, but he's not this it's a job, it's a business. He's not gonna be like he's not gonna baby you. And so like in Mercedes he was a bit ruthless. Like he would go on to Valtteri's radio and be like, hey Valtteri, you need to yield to Lewis, and like it would basically force Valtteri to be the second driver. So I think he's probably the best thing that's ever happened to Williams in modern times. Obviously, Williams was very successful back in the 90s, but they haven't been very successful over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years since then. So I think that he's probably the best thing that's ever happened to them. I'm interested to see where he can take them. I think it's going to take probably another couple of years to get there because they're only, I think the new regulations are going to show the development because they are so behind on this version of regulations development that they just need to start doing it for the new regulations, and they're going to have the same time and basically like the same access to people and stuff like that for the newer regulations, where in the last one they didn't really have that.
Well, and on top of it, we've talked about it a lot off camera, but the way James kind of speaks about the sport and the team and the job, yeah, he's being tough on Logan, but I think, look at the way Red Bull handles similar situations.
Yeah.
I think in a professional world, tough love is gonna be needed. And Williams is in a tough spot right now. They're behind significantly.
Oh yeah.
They know that they're not going to, be a race winning car tomorrow. It's going to take time. And so I definitely would say, like, if you haven't, go watch some of like the Williams videos with him discussing, like, he really does seem to have like a long-term plan. And I mean, he's obviously, he was at Braun and Mercedes for all those years. Like, he clearly is not sitting here jumping from team to team. So I definitely think he's in it for the long haul.
I
Um,
could see him being team principal of Williams for the next 20 years.
yeah, I mean, some of these guys have been in these roles for a really long time. I feel like there has been like a big shakeup in the last like 2, 3 years. And maybe this is just, the cycle of, Formula One and we're still new.
I mean,
Um,
Christian Horner has been team principal of Red Bull for like a good 15, 20 years. Toto has been team principal of Mercedes since 2013 or maybe 2009, actually. no, 2010 when they switched over to Mercedes
Yeah.
and they weren't Braun. Like some of these guys have been in charge of their teams for a really long time. I can't imagine that he would spend all this time building the team up and then just leaving. Um,
No.
I I could really see him being there for the next 15, 20 years, like taking the good 5, 6 years to build it up to be a championship winning team and then staying on to continue that.
Yeah. I definitely just feel like there is, like, a level of patience that we're seeing that would not always be found amongst all the team principals. Um,
100%.
but yeah, definitely I think it's always interesting finding out their backgrounds because it's never, at least in the time we've been watching, it isn't super discussed. So yeah, that's James Vowles.
Awesome. Well, I am now going to get into the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix. So, for the 1991 Spanish Grand Prix, this race is considered the best Spanish Grand Prix that has happened. Um, I think it's just because of all of the action that was happening at the front. It honestly reminds me of the most recent race that we just had. I think that it was rain, it wasn't rain, it was rain, it wasn't rain, and then the top five were just fighting the entire time for the top three spots, basically. There was some action at the back of the race, but not too much. So the championship challenger, who was Mansell, I believe, he actually was limping all weekend because he had sprained his ankle in a football, soccer, if you're from America, match. Because yeah. So he started off the weekend just limping, which is always a great start to an F1 weekend. Um, Qualifying was nothing crazy, to be honest. The way that the qualifying order, I have the top seven. Uh, P1 was Gerard Berger with McLaren. P2 was Nigel Mansell with Williams. P3 was Ayrton Senna with McLaren. P4, Ricardo Patrese with Williams. P5, Michael Schumacher with Benetton. P6, Alain Prost with Ferrari. And P7, Jean Alesi with Ferrari. These are going to be the top seven that are competing for the top three spots basically the entire time. So the race morning, the morning actually started with a ton of rain and it stopped by the start time, although the track was still wet. So kind of similar to the weird issues that we had in Montreal, but it was still raining by the time that the race actually happened, but you understand the picture. Um, a lot of them were on wet tires because the track was still wet. So Senna actually got away and challenged Berger with Mansell on his tail right off the start. I can't remember if Senna actually won this. I don't think I think he won 90, 92, and 93 for the championship. I don't think he won 91. Anyways, also some drama that happened during this year of F1. A couple weeks before this race, the French president of FISA, or I think it was called FISA at that point instead of the FIA, was replaced by somebody else. So if you watch the Senna documentary and you see the French president, he is no longer at this point. Not I don't like to say no longer. That sounds like he died. He didn't
He
die. He was
died.
just replaced. He did not die. Um, so yeah, at the start, Sonny got away and challenged Berger and with Mansell on his tail. By the end of lap one, Schumacher had already passed Mansell for third. Berger started to scamper away, but there was a lot of action at the start, like in the front of the pack. Senna, Schumacher, Mansell, and Alessi all were fighting over third place, which seems like absolute chaos, especially because the track is not fully dry. Um, Mansell tried to chase Berger and force his way past Schumacher before setting off after Senna. So at that point, I couldn't even tell you what place Mansell was in because of the chaos that's happening between all of them. That's like the hardest part to follow with this race. I don't know what place any of them are in for a good majority of it because it's just like Mansell passes Senna and then Schumacher passes Prost and then it's just chaos.
Yeah.
Um Okay, on the main straight, Mansell and Senna sit off after each other, with Mansell passing Senna actually on that main straight, which I feel like is the main place that we typically see people pass nowadays, unless that's usually what they're passing with DRS, which will be no longer soon, which I don't think we've mentioned that actually. We will talk about that at the very end. We'll talk about that in our
Yeah.
final thoughts. At this point in F1, DRS did not exist. It's only been around for like the last 13 or so years.
Yeah.
So Prost was the first of the front runners to stop for tires, for dry tires. Berger followed and had a really bad stop. By bad stop, I'm guessing it was a good 20 plus second stop. That's my
It
guess.
it's gonna be wouldn't it be longer in 91 because they were refueling?
That is so
So pit
true.
stops were like a minute or 2.
Watching a Le Mans pit stop and watching them refuel, I
We'll
was,
get to that at the end because I have a
yeah.
few things to talk about it.
Okay. So Mansell and Senna stopped on the same lap, and if you can recall, Senna was actually behind Mansell, and McLaren had a phenomenal pit stop and got Senna out ahead of Mansell, which is ironic because the next year was going to be. It was no, it wasn't the next year. It was like 2 or 3 years later that Senna was on Williams's team, and Mansell was his teammate, I believe.
Mhm.
Potentially, I think that's correct. Um, okay. So Senna then actually hold on. I'm going too quickly. So Mansell and Senna stopped on the same lap, and Senna, of course, came out first, but he was in the lead from Berger, Mansell, and Schumacher. So he came out like in the lead, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And also just remember Schumacher's a little baby in this year.
Yeah.
He's like an actual child here. Not an actual child. I think he's probably like 20. No, maybe not 20. Actually, no, he
Okay,
might.
doesn't
Anyways,
matter. You're just
um,
focus.
sorry, I just chugged my coffee, so it's like really hitting me right now.
I can tell.
Okay, Senna let Berger through on the next lap as Mansell closed in. The rain began again, and Senna had a spin at the last corner, dropping him from second to fifth place, which is a real bummer for Senna, to be honest. Schumacher passed Prost for third place. Again, I don't know who's in what place half the time because it's like this person's passing this person and blah blah blah. Anyways,
Yeah.
lap 20, Mansell passed Berger for the lead and pulled away. Berger actually came under pressure from Schumacher. The battle ended when Schumacher spun trying to pass, bumping him down to sixth. There's so many spins in this race, but then Berger immediately retires due to an electronic failure in his car. And if you're listening, obviously you're listening, hello. Um, this was the time period where electronics were just really being really like introduced to the cars. Senna was a huge proponent against this
Yeah.
because it made it a slightly more unpredictable and dangerous for the cars. Nowadays, obviously, there's so much electronics within the cars, but at this point, it was just being really introduced. So I think electronic failures happen more often than they obviously do nowadays because it was just brand new, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Um, Patrici and Alessi passed Senna for third and fourth, dropping him to fifth, obviously. Mansell's win with Mansell, shocker, ended up winning, obviously. And that actually, so Senna was in fifth place, but because Mansell had won and Senna was in fifth place, that meant that the title race was back on, but Senna still led by 16 points as the teams headed to Japan. And so that's why this race was considered one of the best Spanish Grand Prix because it made the title race, it like started
So
it again.
close.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
made the next couple races so important. There were times where this race was declared not a championship race, so it was still part of the F1 calendar, but they weren't counting it for anything.
Yeah.
This was when the whole situation was very different. So the order of who actually the top six order. P1 was Nigel Mansell with Williams. P2 was Alan Prost and Ferrari. P3 Ricardo Patrese and Williams. It was a double podium for Williams. Can't wait for those days again.
They're coming.
I would love a double podium over a double DNF. It's quite depressing. Anyways,
Yeah.
P4 for Gina Lessie in Ferrari, P5 with for Ayrton Senna in McLaren, and P6 with Michael Schumacher in Benetton. This was when Schumacher was racing for Benetton. I don't know what Benetton turned into after this. I actually was going to go through the entire order of how people finished or how people qualified, but there were 30 drivers at this point. So it would have been a very long time. And this was also when Martin Brundle was racing. Martin Brundle was in this
Oh.
race, which is
Oh,
so weird to think that Martin Brundle raced in a race with Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, Alan
gross.
Prost, like Gerard Berger, Nigel Mansell, and then Martin Brundle.
Hey, I mean, he was a racer, he was there.
No, I know. It's just it's funny to like when I was going through and reading the names of who raced in it, I was like, no way. This is random. I forgot that you were racing around the same time as these guys. So I guess that makes sense. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to go over that race is because people say it was one of the best races. I probably think that it's one of those races you have to watch to actually understand what's
Mhm.
going on because me reading off this person past this person makes no sense because I don't even understand who was in what order the majority of the race. You can go back on F1 TV and watch
Mhm.
any race that was filmed. I believe you can go all the way back through the 90s. So leading up into this race, I would recommend watching it, at least for those first 20 laps, because it sounds like a lot of the action was in those first 20 laps. And then maybe towards the end, watch it as well, because that's where all the spins were happening. But yeah, this is one of the more historical tracks. This track, I believe, is actually one of the cheapest for us to go to. Um, I don't know if I think it's a little bit outside of the actual city of Barcelona, which is not my favorite city. I personally, as
Emma, you're gonna get so much hate from people.
no, 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 no. Okay. The reason why I don't dislike the city of Barcelona. I think I was only there for 48 hours, so I was doing all the touristy things, and I was
Mm.
there with people who was doing we were all doing touristy things. And I was there in the heat of the summer. So I was just getting frustrated because I, as a New Yorker, don't like tourists. Um, but even if I am a tourist someplace, I refuse to admit that I'm a tourist. And I don't want other people doing touristy things where I'm doing touristy things. So when there was a crowd of people like at the Gaudi townhouse, I was like, leave. This is for me, not for you. Um,
Emma, you sound like such an asshole right now.
I don't like people.
You ladies and gentlemen that don't know Emma personally, this is her stubbornness.
I think also walking along the beach, it was giving Venice Beach. And like that for I was shocked, but I also think
Alright.
I was at a
Y
touristy
you
beach.
y alright, let's move past your feelings for Barcelona.
I will say the Sagrada Familia is one of the most magnificent things you will ever witness in your life. There you go. There's my praise to Barcelona.
Oh my god, Emma.
All right,
Well,
we are going to get into our final thoughts now.
please don't hate on us for Emma's
No, no, no,
opinion.
no. Spain is a great country, obviously. All right, final thoughts. All right, even though I just spent a good 2 minutes telling you all my issues with the city of Barcelona, I'm very excited for this race. Again, this is one of the ones that we didn't watch last year because it happened earlier on in the season. So I think it's going to be a really good race. I think it's going to be an interesting one when it comes to the championship standings for both constructors and drivers because with both Ferraris DNFing last weekend, it definitely put a damper on their points, but it kind of helped McLaren. So I'm interested to see where they go. I'm also interested to see if Mercedes can actually do well again this weekend. I don't know if they will, obviously, because I can't predict the future.
Yeah, so for those that don't know right now, I'll just give you the top 5, constructors championship. So Red Bull is at 301 points right now. Ferrari is at 252 points. The gap has gotten a little bit bigger, but, not super big because of Checo. So, McLaren is in 3rd place right now with 212 points. So again, Ferrari has 252 and McLaren has 212. I feel like out of everyone, the majority of the fighting will probably be between McLaren and Ferrari
Yeah.
because I think McLaren is gonna start to in my opinion, I see McLaren surpassing Ferrari in performance.
This was the time of year last year that McLaren started to kind of get it together.
Yeah.
And we're about to go to Silverstone because that's in 2 races, I think. So and that's where McLaren was like that was where they brought their major upgrades to last year, and they were like completely show-stopping. So I could see McLaren passing Ferrari for P2 in the Constructors' Championship.
Mhm.
And I think that's gonna make Ferrari panic a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
I also am interested to see if the poor strategy and rough decision making at Ferrari is going to continue, kind of like it had last weekend.
Yeah, Mercedes right now is at 124 points. So my feeling for Mercedes is that they're kind of going to be a solid fourth. Aston Martin's right behind them in fifth with 58 points.
Yeah, they're not catching
Um,
up.
I just yeah, I feel like one, hopefully Mercedes is on the up and up, but again, I just feel like in terms of where the top 3 currently are, I just feel like it's gonna be hard to close that gap. Um, but yeah, I feel like unfortunately not unfortunately, but I think that the playing field is like, in terms of the top 3, I think it's pretty even right now. I just see
It
based
depends.
off of
It
yeah, it
depends
depends.
if the gaps between Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari stay pretty even throughout the actual physical races, because
Yeah.
then even though Red Bull is so far ahead of McLaren and Ferrari, if the gaps stay pretty even and there's a chance that McLaren and Ferrari win a bunch more races throughout the season, that means that Red Bull might not, and then it would drop down a bit and it could become a bit more even. I do have a feeling that if it does come to that, it's going to be an Abu Dhabi 2021 situation where it is we don't know who's going to win the championship for constructors or drivers until the very last race.
Yeah. I mean, we're what, 9? Is Barcelona the 10th race?
I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not even halfway through yet.
Yeah.
But I do like for those if you don't follow F1 or motorsport on Instagram, and pretty often they do comparisons of the current constructors championship compared to the last year during like where we are in terms of points, and it does seem like it's significantly closer than last year.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I'm excited. I don't even remember us acknowledging this race last year.
No, because
So,
it happened earlier on in the season last year.
okay. So, I'm excited to see, the Spanish fans.
Yeah, I am too. I think it'll be cool.
Yeah, I feel like every single country brings a different level of energy, and I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to talk about Le Mans.
Okay. Do we want to talk
Le-
about Le Mans in a quick second while I finish up F1 stuff?
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so one thing that we did not mention in last episode or this episode so far is the FIA have basically said that you can be 17 to get your super license now when you had to be 18. So that means Kimi Antonelli would be able to get his super license. It's a controversial opinion that people have had when it really just everybody has had no one can agree on if he should be racing in F1 because he just joined F2 this year. He skipped F3, and his performance in F2 has kind of been a little lackluster at the moment. He hasn't won a race in F2, and people are nervous that he's being thrown in there a little bit too early. And meanwhile, Paul Aaron, who was dropped by the Mercedes Driver Academy, has been on the podium several times this year in F2,
Mhm.
and they're not even mentioning him at all. And so people are worried that they're so focused that Kimmy, like somebody said that Kimmy's gonna be the next Max Verstappen, and people ran with it. And now it's like so much pressure on this 17-year-old kid, and we don't even know if he's good enough to win F2. Like, give him another year potentially. So it's kind of been the conversation that's been going on over the last couple weeks, but with the FIA saying that a 17-year-old can get their super license, it's made it even more dicier because it's like, well, obviously this is because of Kimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know where I stand with the FIA. It's again their complete and absolute obvious lack of consistency.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I also do think that F3, F2 going in that, yes, they're very different cars in Formula 1, but it just
They're there for a
what
reason.
yeah, and I don't know why Mercedes is, like, so adamant on this, maybe they put their eggs in one basket, and this is, like, the result, but, yeah, personally, I feel like, let the kid be a kid,
Yeah.
or and my biggest fear too is that they're gonna throw him in, it's gonna be an abysmal beginning of next season if, um, you know, worst case scenario, I hope it doesn't happen, but it's like, Mercedes, like, w why are you like a dog with a bone with him right now?
Well, I think he has to have a super license in order to even be in a FP1 like rookie session. And so I think that their plan is that he can get his super license now and then he'll do a few FP1 sessions to see how he is with it. And that will determine whether or not they decide to sign him. I do think that they're going to get down to the end where Carlos will sign with Williams, and they'll have nobody in that seat so far in the second Mercedes seat because they're hoping that Kimi Antonelli will do well on it. And then I fear that he's going to perform in FP1, and then they're kind of going to be like screwed, and then we'll just have to choose someone in the end.
Hey, I mean, there are drivers right now on the grid that everyone is predicting they're not gonna be there next year, so, I mean, there's options, it's just a quite a interesting strategy,
I do think if there is one team that a young rookie could be on and be successful just because of the emotional and like mental support that you get, I think it could be Mercedes. I think that Toto has obviously made that a important aspect of the team and a priority. So I would hope that they would develop him well and not just kind of treat him how Haas treated Mick and how like other teams have treated rookies. So, and I think that we see that even with the way that James Vowles treated Logan Sargent last year and treated him with a lot of patience and kindness. Like you don't just learn that behavior out of nowhere. Like that was
yeah.
learned probably from Mercedes and the way that they've treated their drivers in the past. So I would imagine that if he is in the car next year, they obviously expect great things, but it's his first year and they're gonna hopefully be patient. I hope.
Yeah, plus, maybe they're looking at it as, like, the long term of Lewis at
I think so.
Mercedes, maybe they're like, "Let's get him when he's young," we can work with it, but yeah, I don't know. It's
All
gonna
right.
be interesting.
Le Mans time.
Okay,
Oh,
so
wait. Sorry, one last thing. The new regulations that were talked about, the car for 2026, the F1
mhm.
car, is not going to have DRS. It's going to have it's called like the MA. I think it's literally MOM, the mom. Move, I don't know, something move or whatever. But it's basically like Indy cars push to pass. Um, so we're not gonna have DRS anymore, which is gonna be interesting. I actually do think we talked about this last episode. Okay, never mind.
We
Let's talk about
mentioned
Le Mans.
Yeah, we mentioned the 2026 regulations quickly, but obviously not 2026. Yes,
Yeah,
2026. Holy
2026.
shit. But obviously when we get closer to that and there's more info out there, we'll let you guys know. But yeah, so Le Mans was literally this morning, it wrapped up.
Yep,
For those that don't know, it is the third leg of the racing Triple Crown that makes up the Indy 500, Monaco Grand Prix, and Le
24
Mans.
hours of Le Mans.
24 Hours of Le Mans is I believe it is the fourth round, so the fourth
I
race
think so.
for the World Endurance Championship. So honestly, before yesterday, I didn't really know a lot about Le Mans. I still don't. But I didn't realize that like it's not their only 24-hour race.
Yeah, they have several.
Several. So, for those, just a little bit of very high level info. It is a race and it is 24 hours exactly. So it's not about getting to the finish line first, it's about getting the farthest first, like by the time
Yeah.
the clock counts down. It happens outside of Le Mans, France, and there was, like, 60 something cars or something in it,
Yeah,
and
so it's
each
not all the same. It's not like they have 60 F1 kind of cars there, or they have 60 like IndyCar kind of cars there. There's three, from what I could understand, there were three different categories racing on the actual track. So there's hypercar, there's LMP2, and then there's LMGT3. So the
Mhm,
LM just means Le Mans at the front, I'm pretty sure. The P2 are kind of a little bit similar. They're similar to hypercars, but like in between a little bit. And then GT3 are your normal Gran Turismo cars,
mhm,
which, if you've read anything about the Iron Dames, which is the all-female team that was racing in Le Mans, they race in the LMGT3 category. Ferrari won Le Mans last year in the, what is it? The hypercar, which they also
mhm.
won it in again this year, but with not the same car as last year. Last year was the number 50 car. This year is the number 51. The number 50 car came in third, which, from what I can understand, if you don't win, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter you came in second or third. If you don't win, nobody cares.
I think it's because it's such a physically demanding, emotionally demanding, strategy demanding. I think it's just the fact that, like, you did it. Like, you
Yeah.
finished.
Yeah.
Um, I did just wanna shout out, did you see what the Iron Dames placed?
No, I didn't.
They placed 5th.
Okay, I think last year, I think
Yeah.
they might have won it last year actually. Which Durian Penn, who is actually in F1 Academy, she last year raced with the Iron Dames in Le Mans, and this year she was supposed to be racing, but she
Mhm.
actually got hurt, so she was unable to. And in case you don't understand, if you've never watched an endurance race before or read up on it, it's not one driver obviously driving the car for 24 hours. Typically, it's a team of three drivers,
3.
and you switch off. If you ever have a chance, watch the movie Ford versus Ferrari. That takes place during that, like the end race is Le Mans. And there's always three drivers. You switch off, and the time that you're not racing, you're probably napping, I would assume. And they actually have some very interesting rules. Did you hear about the toolbox thing?
No.
So the track for Le Mans is gigantic. I'm not sure the actual distance of it, but it's quite large, probably because you're racing on it for a full 24 hours. And so if it were the size of an F1 track, it would get extremely boring. And there's 60 cars on the track, and we see how much traffic there is with 20 cars on an F1 track. So if there's
And
60, it's got to be
and
gigantic.
and honestly, watching it so I only had it on for, like, an hour and a half. Watching it, you don't realize that there's 60 cars out there.
No,
Like,
no.
it is not, like, as busy as my brain would have believed.
Yeah. Well, so by the time I only watched the last hour and a half, I woke up this morning and I put it on, and there were several cars that were already that had already DNF'd.
Mhm.
There was a 4 hour safety car last night in the middle of the night. But the toolbox rule, we'll get to the safety car in a second. The toolbox rule, when the car is out on track, you could be halfway across the track from where the actual pit lane is. If you're halfway across and something happens to your car, the only person who is allowed to touch the car on the track, unless you want a DNF, is the driver who's driving the car at that moment. So they, in their car, literally have a simple toolbox with like a screwdriver, all of those things, and they have to literally pull over and fix the car themselves and then get back in and finish driving to the pit, because then once the car is in the pit lane, then the mechanics and engineers can touch it, but the only person who can touch it on track if you want to continue competing is the driver themselves, which I think is insane. Can you imagine F1 drivers being like, hold on, let me just pull over and fix my car? Absolutely not.
I mean, some of them have done it, some of them have. So, they've literally been in Le Mans.
Yeah,
So,
Fernando, I think Fernando's won it before.
I know Jensen Button was doing it this year, Mick Schumacher was doing it
Nick
this year,
DeVries.
Nick DeVries. So, like, it's not unbelievable because 'cause they're
I
doing
think
it.
Felipe Drugovich was in it this year. A lot of
It
if you know anything about IndyCar, you'll know Valentino Rossi. He was in it,
Yeah.
which I would assume. I hope he's related to Alexander Rossi, maybe potentially. I don't know. Same last name. Um, But yeah, so they also had a 4-hour safety car in the middle of the night last night because it was raining so hard. Apparently, within the first hour, people were like, "It makes sense why we have this safety car. Nobody can see. People cannot be driving like this." But they had to keep driving. Obviously, you can't stop.
Yeah.
But then eventually, it was fine. But the safety car stayed out. So then it just continued. And so people were like, honestly, this was kind of nice because then I could go home and take a nap and I would be fine. I wouldn't miss anything. But by the time that I started watching it this morning, there obviously was no safety car. It was the last hour and a half. And the track is so large that it will rain on one part of the track and then it's not raining on the other parts of the track. So it was only raining on the start finish straight this morning when I logged on. And then the rest of it seemed fine. But I think they had to have wet tires on because of that, because of how much rain there was. Um, I think Toyota actually came in second in the hypercar, which was very random. There was also a few American made cars. There was a
Cadillac.
Cadillac. I don't think Porsche did as well as that they were hoping. Um,
I thought it was definitely very, very different from Formula 1,
oh,
but
so
if
different.
you have the opportunity, I would definitely check one of the races out, if not Le Mans, itself because, uh, yeah, very, very cool, interesting, different view on the world of motorsport, and something it's important, it's talked about, uh and again, I think you do see a lot of F1 indie guys. Yeah.
Even the commentators, I mean, Alex Brundle was commentating, and
Mhm.
then towards the very end, because I had like logged off to go, I don't remember, I think I like took a nap real quick, and then I woke back up and watched like the last like 20 minutes of it, and it was Alex Jakes who was talking, and I was like, "What are you doing
Mhm.
here?"
Yeah.
And he, of course, narrated the last lap beautifully as always, and he was like, "It took 50 years for Ferrari to come back and win it, and they won it last year." And they'll win it
Mhm.
again. You see what it means to the boys in the garage as like they zoom in on like the two drivers who aren't driving sobbing. And I'm like, they've been awake for 24 hours. I would be sobbing too. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's an insane feat for anyone, let alone the racing community, but yeah, very, very cool thing that happened this weekend.
well, and we had mentioned the refueling. Watching a pit stop for Le Mans was wild because I think it's probably very similar to an IndyCar pit stop, but just knowing how long the car has to go for in Le Mans, it just feels it was wild to watch because one thing we always talk about is the refueling thing. Obviously, they don't do that really in F1 anymore, because people were like
Because
burning.
fire,
Yeah.
you know?
And it's interesting to see when they're refueling, the only person who is by the car is the person who is refueling the car. Everybody
Mhm.
else is hands off, stepped back as far away as they can, but like still close enough to quickly grab the tires and everything once they're done. And the moment that the person pulls like the fuel pump out of the car and closes it up, then everyone's like hands on change the tires as quickly as possible. But they don't have as many people changing tires as F1 does. It's more similar to an IndyCar where we have the rear, like our tires are the rear, you get the front of the car, and then it's done. But the refueling is what takes so long in these pit stops.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and plus, I'm curious in the pit stops how much, like, bits of repair they have to do, if they're doing anything sort of quick or replacing. Because I mean, watching it, those cars are getting, like, beaten down.
Oh yeah.
Um, I personally loved the guy who would hop onto the front of the cars and clear the windshield.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think it might have been the hype cars, I don't know if it was all of them, but there was, like, a guy, and he would come, jump, and he would, like, clear all the bugs and debris from the the windshield.
Well, they do have windshield wipers on all
Mhm,
the
and they have lights.
cars. Yeah,
They flash at each other when they're passing.
I know. I found that very interesting. But I guess it makes sense that they would have lights because they're driving in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So there is a really cool driver dash cam of Fernando Alonso from a couple years ago when he did Le Mans, and because there's a part of the track where you're driving through like the countryside of France,
Mhm.
basically. And that's what you see from his car, like the countryside, like fields of green, basically. I'm assuming it's people's like farms in the middle of the track.
Mhm.
And it's actually a very cool cam to watch. But I hope to watch more endurance races because I found it really interesting. But the full 24 hours, I personally cannot be the person to sit there and watch a full 24 hours. I enjoy watching bits and pieces throughout it. If you can sit there and watch 24 hours, honestly, props to you.
We commend you. We
Yeah.
commend you.
And
I think mom would've killed me, but yeah.
all right. Well, I think that's all that we really have for today. Hopefully, the Barcelona Grand Prix will be a really good one, and we will actually be in switched positions for the next time that you see us. So, Mary Catherine will be where I currently am, and I will be where MC is. Also, we apologize for the lack of video for the last episode. I'm hoping that I can get this fixed for this episode. Um, Basically, we are filming this over Zoom, and the way that Zoom saves, it can save with a complete red filter, so we looked like demons. Which, if that's what you want to watch, let me know, and I'll post that instead.
Please
But
don't. We're not going to, for the love of God.
I'm gonna try to ensure that this does not happen this time, but no promises. If it does happen this time, I'm really hoping that this will be the last time that it happens, and then we could try a different platform to record this episode, the next episode. But we shall see. Um, Yeah, make sure to follow us on all of our socials on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, everything.
We're over 750 followers on
Let's
Instagram.
go.
Yeah,
Almost at
so
800.
almost.
I know. And just to think, less than a year ago, we started this literally less than a year
Mhm.
ago.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right. Well, bye guys.
Bye.